Happy Wednesday, Razorback fans. 3 days away from Arkansas versus Alabama at Donald W. Reynolds Razorback Stadium in Fayetteville. 2:30 kickoff on CBS. Going to be a crazy atmosphere, a readout, Robert. So we're going to have Tony Tsoukalas from Tide Illustrated, that's the Rivals website, covering Alabama on the Gridiron Hogs podcast today. I got Robert Stewart with me. I'm Mason Choate. Alex Trader will join us when Tony comes on. But Tony, they had me do a little like behind the enemy line story for them, Robert, and they asked about the readout and how that's going to help Arkansas. And I want to get your take on this because I kind of answered, and I was like, I really don't know if it's going to change that much because most of the stadium is red anyways during a normal game. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it, it's like something to rally around. I don't know. Like you said, it's really not going to change much of the, you know, outlook of what people are wearing because people wear red anyway. The opponent's going to be wearing red, so I guess that's the one advantage with the red opponent is that you'll have the entire stadium look uniform. Um, but I mean, just something to get people going for game day is really all I can think of.
Well, that was one thing that he added. I don't know if he wrote the questions or someone else, that Alabama is a red opponent, which is true, but also they're probably going to be wearing all white. So, I mean, it's not like Alabama's going to be wearing red. They'll have red helmets, but I don't know. That's just something
Well,
I,
not the team, but their fans.
yeah. And okay, that makes sense. Yes, it will look uniform. All right, let's hit a couple of headlines before we get to Tony Tsoukalas. We never mentioned that Arkansas dropped to number 20 in the AP poll. That happened. So they dropped from 10 to 20 after the Texas A&M loss. Let's see. From practice on Tuesday, Jaden Hazelwood in a green jersey, and we can confirm that he cut his hair. So whether or not that's going to help him is to be determined. They were running a 3-2-6 defense during fastball, with the three starting D linemen being Landon Jackson, Isaiah Nichols, Zach Williams. Seems like Landon Jackson has taken over that starting spot. Not really sure what's going on with Jashad Stewart because he hasn't played the past two games, but he dressed out against A&M and he looks fine at practice. So don't really know what's going on there. Another note, Cade Fortin ran as the second team quarterback, but we also know that fastball means nothing. So, you always have to take the fastball takeaways with a grain of salt. And that's really all I got from practice on Tuesday. We talked to the players. It was really a lot of, basic talk. Of course, they're going to say that they feel like they can compete with Alabama, and that's to be determined. Check out my Twitter at Choate Mason. I posted a video of Will Anderson just speaking nonsense this morning. Uh, we asked Tony Tsoukalas about it. Apparently, he's the one who asked the question, but basically, he asked if Will Anderson plays with hate or whatever, and Will Anderson said the audacity for the other team to even step on the field is disrespectful to me. And then he went on to say the audacity for the fans to show up and for the team to come step on the field and play with us. That's just his mindset. So whatever,
Love to
man.
make things up to get mad about.
That whatever, man. That literally makes zero sense because if the other team didn't step on the field, you wouldn't play a game. So whatever. All right. That's all we got for you. Let's talk to Tony Tsoukalas of Tide Illustrated. All right, we now welcome on Tony Tsoukalas from Tide Illustrated. That's the Alabama site covering, or the rival site covering Alabama, excuse me. Tony, thanks for coming on with us. First question, I think everybody knows that Alabama is always a good football team. But the question is, how does Alabama this year compare to Alabama last year? Are they as good? Tell us what you've seen through the first four games.
Man, it's been kind of a mystery. I think people are still trying to figure out if they're as good. I think the defense is better. And then I don't think anybody really knows what the offense is. It's they've got talent, but it's been kind of inconsistent. You've seen them hit big plays, and then there's been times when they've just really hit lulls during games. Even against like Louisiana Monroe, there was a small lull, and then there was like five straight drives against Texas where they didn't have a first down. And look at last year's offense that never happened. So it's weird. I think it's on the same level. I want to say it's on the same level as last year's team, and I think this team can really be elite. But I think this week's one of those weeks that you kind of look and you think it's kind of like a test to see, like, really are they at that elite level? I think, like, how good is Texas, right? I mean, they just lost to Texas Tech, and Alabama really struggled against them. I think Arkansas is going to be the best team that Alabama's played so far, and I think, it's one of those things that you'll probably judge them on how they perform on Saturday.
So I saw a stat earlier in the week that in 5 true road starts for Bryce Young, I mean, they've won all 5 games, but 4 of them have been decided by 3 or fewer points. So I guess what is it about Alabama on the road that they find themselves in games that they're, closer to the opponent than normal, including against Texas earlier this year?
Yeah, it was really actually interesting too, that Alabama was even talking about. There's this whole like hateful competitor thing that's going on, and Nick Saban wants to get back to being a hateful competitor. And so, like Will Anderson the other day was talking about like how he wants to get the fans leaving by like halftime or leaving by like third quarter. It's like, man, like, when has that been the case? Like, I guess Mississippi State last year, but like that hasn't really been the case for y'all, like over the last year. So you're right. There has been some close games. I mean, Florida was close. Auburn was, really close, and then Texas was close. I don't know. I think a lot of the times, you look at a lot of those games, they really played down to their opponent. I think, they're better than what they played against Texas. They're certainly better than what they played against Auburn. That Florida game had a lot of conditions, and it was like Bryce Young's first road game. I'm trying to think of what's the other one. That was a close game, but yeah, I think you're right about that is a weird stat, and I think that's something that you can't downplay heading into this Arkansas game, because I mean, I think, I think there's like going to be a red out or whatever. I think if the fans are still going to be pumped, it's going to be a nice environment over there, and I think if Alabama doesn't bring their A game, it's going to be a tough place to play.
The passing numbers have correlated with kind of a question. We won the Heisman last year, but has Bryce Young kind of shown that same ability throwing the football? Do you think there's that same connection that he had with his receivers last season? Is there a guy on this receiving staff or in this receiving core that you think he feels comfortable giving the ball to in a clutch situation?
Yeah, the lack of passing hasn't really been on Bryce as much as it's been on the receivers getting separation. And they got separation last week against Vanderbilt, but they haven't been getting that. There's not a Jamison Williams, and there's not a John Mechie. And me personally, I thought Jermaine Burton was going to come in and really just be the guy. I saw what he did at Georgia, and I thought a lot of what his inconsistency at Georgia was basically on the quarterback there and the offense there. And I even made a statement that I thought Jermaine Burton was a better John Mechie. I don't think that's the case. So I don't think there is a Jamison Williams on the team yet. I don't think there's a John Mechie on the team yet. So it's still a talented wide receiving core. And the thing about this receiving core that's weird is that it could be anybody any week. So it could be Burton this week, but it also could be Brooks, or it could be Holden, or it could be that guy. So I guess that's probably harder to scheme against than like maybe if you could shut down Jamison Williams. But the thing about it is, like, there's not that guy and there's not those big plays. And so I think the chemistry is there. And I think, like, especially like a guy like Burton, I think that they played, they knew each other from playing high school ball in California. Same with Holden. I mean, he played on a 7-on-7 team with Holden, with Trayshawn Holden. So I think the chemistry is there with a lot of these guys. It's just a matter of kind of figuring out how to get separation with the receivers. And I think it'll get a little bit better. I think, I think JoJo Earl might be back for this game. He's a guy that can really make plays in the slot. Tyler Harrell's the transfer they got from Louisville. He maybe could be back, and he's really fast. He could he at least has that Jamison Williams speed. We'll see if I don't think he's going to be the same exact receiver, but if they can get some of those guys back, maybe it helps open up things in the offense.
Talking with Tony Tsoukalas of Tide Illustrated. Tony, you kind of hit the opponents that Alabama has played, but that Texas game, they struggled. And I'm curious, what was it that Texas really exposed that maybe Arkansas could do the same this Saturday?
I think that's a lot of just what Alabama was doing. I mean, they're making so many mistakes. Was there like 15 penalties in that game? And it was just like they just kept on, shooting themselves in the foot. I think they couldn't get any consistent, running game in that game. That the running numbers have always been okay for Alabama, but like until the last 2 weeks, it had been like they'd hit like an 80-yard run and they couldn't get a 3rd and 1. And that's kind of like what had happened. I know Bryce Young got sacked a few times in that game, which I think he got sacked twice, and they've only given up 4 sacks in the season. So it was just a lot of inopportune time, and really just not until the last 2 drives that really just not making plays when they needed to make plays. I think you could really speak to the separation with wide receivers there too, like one of the things we talked about. So like basically all the problems that they've been having kind of culminated in that game. And it was almost to the point where it was too late. I think it was also a huge thing is that was their first road test. That game felt a lot like the Florida game felt last year, where it was like there's a lot of adverse conditions. It was hot. There's the first road game. I mean, like, not to make excuses because they should have played better, but I think that you could maybe chalk up some of that stuff to early in the season. But that's why I think it's so important to see what they'll do against Arkansas, because if you start making those same mistakes or those same excuses, in week 5, what's your excuse now? Like you've played a tough game. It's late enough in the season that you shouldn't be making these mistakes. So we'll really see this week.
I'm curious about the Alabama offensive line. I want to get a couple of your thoughts on that because Arkansas's defensive line, their pass rush, has been really what's holding the entire unit together. The secondary's been just atrocious over the past couple of weeks. And then Devon Achane for Texas A&M was the first guy to rush for over 150 yards, I think, on him last week. So maybe the run defense stepped down a little bit. I'm curious, how does the matchup in the trenches seem to shake up in your eyes this week?
The crazy thing about Alabama is they don't really have a front 5 set yet. I mean, the guard position's kind of rotating. So I mean, like they've got Tyler Steen, the left tackle they got in from Vanderbilt. He's going to be the left tackle. Got J.C. Latham's going to be the right tackle. And then probably, I mean, Darian Delcart started all 4 games at the center, so you put him there. But then the guard positions have rotated out. I mean, it's probably going to be Javion Cohen at left guard and Emil Ekiyor at right guard, but there's Tyler Booker, the true freshman, and he's kind of played both positions. So they've kind of like had musical chairs between those 2 positions. It's all about getting consistency in the running game. I think they've been pretty good at protecting Bryce Young, and then Bryce Young is kind of just hard to bring down. Even if you do get him pressure, he can kind of wiggle his way out and make plays. I don't think it's going to be a case of Alabama. If Alabama struggles in the offensive line, I don't think it will necessarily be in pass rush. But if they're unable to consistently run the ball and then Arkansas can put them in passing situations, that is when I think that, maybe actually then at that point they could, you could start seeing pressures or sacks or stuff like when Arkansas can kind of like make Alabama one-dimensional if that's, available. So when you're looking at the offensive line, I wonder if maybe Tyler Booker gets a start, because you want to have that guy. He's been better as being a run blocker. You want to have that ability to kind of sustain drives against a good opponent. I wonder if he, bumps Javion Cohen for that left guard spot. So, that's one of the question marks, or like, if you're drawing up questions for this week, that's one of the things you would say about Alabama.
Going to the other side of the ball with that, Arkansas is one of the best rushing teams in the country. They have been over the last year and a half. Passing game this season hasn't necessarily looked, flawless. They've had a couple drops, that they've missed connections a couple of times. How does that play into what Alabama does best? Is that a formula that's going to be a good thing for Arkansas?
Yeah, well, so Alabama's at the beginning of the season, I would have said that, the biggest strength for Alabama is going to be the pass rush, and it probably still is, just because, I mean, you have Will Anderson, Dallas Turner, and Chris Braswell, but they have really stopped the run super well. I mean, like, I get that, like, 3 out of the 4 opponents have been Vanderbilt, Louisiana Monroe, and Utah State. It's really hard to judge against those teams, but Bijan Robinson was a Heisman, or maybe even still is a Heisman candidate, and they held him to 57 yards on 21 attempts. So they have really done well at stopping the run. I know Arkansas's got a good running game as well. I think that is going to be important. It's the same things I kind of said about Alabama. Yeah, that could be the same. You could flip that around to Arkansas, and if Arkansas isn't able to run the ball like they have been, and you start putting in KJ Jefferson into these positions where he has to throw the ball a lot more, you could force him into mistakes. And Alabama certainly has the pass rush to. He's a tough guy to bring down as well. Like Alabama has the pass rush to kind of make him uncomfortable. One thing I like about kind of switching to the receivers, I like the size of Arkansas's receivers. I mean, the top 3 guys are all 6'3" or higher. You got a 6'5" guy leading the group, and that's a interesting matchup because Alabama likes to have big cornerbacks too. So I mean, I just think that could be something that maybe you could use. Maybe you could have back shoulder throws. I mean, look, Alabama really struggled against Treylon Burks. So if KJ Jefferson is kind of pressured, or if you need to do some of those things, like I think you have a formula that at least worked. I mean, you had a big receiver with Treylon Burks, and if I remember right, there was I have to go back and watch the game, but it seemed like there was a lot of jump balls or like back shoulder throws. It didn't feel, and I'm not trying to diss KJ Jefferson in that game because he had a great game against Alabama. It didn't feel like necessarily he had as good of a game as Treylon Burks did against Alabama in that game. And I think there was a lot of jump balls or a lot of like balls that were like Treylon making the play. But if you have big receivers like that, maybe that's the formula. Maybe you can do that. And Alabama, they've gotten better at the cornerback positions, but they still have 2 new starters, and that's not the biggest. That'd probably be the biggest weakness of their defense. I don't know if I would call it weakness. I think they're pretty solid, but like if there's a position that's what I would think is the way you would attack them.
Yeah, and on the other side for Arkansas, their defensive backs. I mean, of course, there's been a lot of injuries there. Jalen Catalon out for the season. Found out this week Ladarius Bishop out for the season. Miles Slusher is back, but they're still trying to rotate guys, figure out who their best 5 defensive backs are. So you kind of hit on the Alabama receivers earlier, how you don't have a Jamison Williams or a John Mechie this season, but also Arkansas has gone against 4 teams now, and every game they've gotten burned in the secondary multiple times, and for the most part, the quarterback has not been able to make the throw. But now you're going against Bryce Young, Heisman Trophy winner. He's going to make that throw. Do you think that the Alabama receivers are going to be able to get that separation enough, and Bryce and the O-line give Bryce Young enough time? Because Arkansas is probably going to send the house quite often against Bryce Young, because that's how they try to counter for the fact that their defensive backs are not great. I'm assuming you would think that Bryce Young can hit those plays. Has he been able to this year?
Yeah, he has. And if it's a matter of Bryce Young or the Alabama receivers against Arkansas secondary, Alabama's going to win like 80-90% of the time. It's really going to be a case of forcing, not giving him the time to work. If it is a fair best on best matchup between Alabama's receiving game or Alabama's passing game against Arkansas secondary, Alabama's going to dominate that. The way that Arkansas can change that is, like you said, bring in the house. They've got a probably one of the best. If Alabama has the best front 7 in the SEC, like Arkansas's number 2 or like right up there. You know what I'm saying? So they have the tools to kind of really pressure Bryce Young and force him the bad throws. He's actually made a few bad throws. I mean, he had a couple of throws, I think, against like Louisiana Monroe that you were like, that was he had one bad interception, and I think he had another one that just kind of like that got into his head a bit. So I think that that's something that Arkansas could definitely do.
Yeah, on Saturday, it will have been 3 weeks since the Razorbacks have forced a turnover. So I'm just curious, like, is there any way that Arkansas can hang if they don't get Alabama to make a mistake in this one, like a turnover?
No, I think that's the key. I think, and Alabama hasn't been forcing turnovers. And if you look at the way that, this game's going to go, it's Arkansas. Arkansas needs to win the turnover battle. And that's where it's going to I mean, that sounds so cliche because in any football game, that's usually what you're looking at. But that's something that Alabama hasn't done, and something I think that that Arkansas needs to do, because that's what you do. I don't think that. I think Alabama's going to be able to move the ball better on Arkansas's defense than Arkansas will be able to move the ball on Alabama's defense. So the even out there is going to be turnovers. I also think that Arkansas needs to like sustain drives, but longer than Alabama. So like you need to have long drives if you're Arkansas. You need to be able to run the ball, take some time off the clock, really wear down Alabama's defense, and then probably hit them on, if they get a turnover, hit a tired Alabama defense with another quick score because they've just been on the field so long. So that's where I think the key to the game is. If it's just, a straight offensive, track meet kind of game, I think Alabama is going to outrun Arkansas. But I do think that there's a chance that, things could, there's a lot of things playing to Arkansas's favor. I mean, Alabama's got some big games coming up. I don't think that they would ever overlook, a ranked opponent on the road like this, but they do have some big games. It is going to be a raucous atmosphere. I kind of want to see how Arkansas kind of bounces back. There's two ways Arkansas can respond from a loss like A&M. They could either come out really fired up, or they could kind of crumble. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's going to be big in this game as well. But if Arkansas can make it a game, I think it could get really increasingly interesting. And so one of the things they do, if they can get some turnovers, all of a sudden, I think I picked like a 20-point outcome or something like that, but all of a sudden, if Arkansas can get some turnovers, you can see that needle change really quick the other way.
Turnovers and then red zone conversion is another really, kind of cliche, but it fits the bill of ways to win games. How is Alabama converting in the red zone?
They've been pretty good. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but that's been something that they've done, I would say, pretty well. I'm trying to look back. There was one time when Bryce took a sack, so against maybe it was UL Monroe, or I forget who it was. I remember it was a home game and they had to kick a field goal. I don't think they've had any turnovers in the red zone. So I think that they've done more or less pretty well. Alabama does really well. The biggest thing that they do is they do really well in the no huddle and the hurry up. So sometimes it kind of depends. Sometimes in the red zone that things kind of slow down. So maybe that could be an advantage for Arkansas. I think Alabama's going to want to, especially if Arkansas is going to blitz like that. I think they're going to want to hurry up, get them going pretty fast. But yeah, I think from a red zone perspective, that is going to be important. I think to answer your question, I think Alabama's been pretty decent at that. But on the flip side, I think it's one of those things like Arkansas is going to have to be pretty that's what you talk about, taking advantage of things. Like Arkansas is going to need to get touchdowns and not field goals. You know what I'm saying? It's so hard to score against this Alabama defense. I think it's only given up 2 touchdowns all season. So I mean, if you have a chance, if you're 3rd and 5 or 3rd and goal at the 5 and you have to kick a field goal, that's just go for it. I mean, you're not going to have that many opportunities to score touchdowns against this team.
So this is going to be the last one for me here. We haven't even mentioned Drew Sanders yet. He's been incredible for the Razorback pass rush, absolutely wreaking havoc in the backfield. I'm curious what the thoughts are on him in Tuscaloosa. I don't know how often it is that a player transfers from Alabama, but I mean it was a pretty big deal for Arkansas.
Yeah, so this one hurts my heart in terms of just being a football, I don't know what Alabama fans are thinking, but as far as a football fan, this one hurts my heart because I have said for a while that Alabama has too many pass rushers, too many edge rushers, and that's why he left. But I had said move that guy to Will or Mike linebacker because I think he could really play it. And sure enough, he goes to Arkansas and he's dominating at that position. And so that's got to sting for Alabama. The good thing for Alabama is Jalen Moody's been really good. He's leading the team in tackles, and Henry To'oTo'o is kind of the leader that he's the signal caller, and he's done a good job of that. I still think Drew Sanders, the way he's playing, would get on the field. So I mean, it's got to sting. It probably gets on the field over Moody, to be honest. But it's I guess easier to swallow for Alabama because Moody's done well.
So I think everybody at this point, not everybody, but a lot of people at this point have seen the Will Anderson quote. So I'm just curious what you thought about him saying that the audacity for a team to step out on the field. That really just made no sense to me.
Yeah, that's just something he's saying to pump himself up. I mean, that's something that, I guess Arkansas could use for like, the whiteboard material or whatever. But the thing is, we're asking Alabama players a lot about the hateful competitor quote that Nick Saban said. And so he was kind of like, that wasn't like an unprompted thing that he said. It's not like he was just like, oh, the audacity. Like we asked him about, I think it was actually me. I asked him about being a hateful. Is he a hateful competitor? And I think he was just trying to describe his mentality of how he psychs himself up to be that quote unquote hateful competitor. I mean, like if that's what he's telling himself, I don't know. It's working because does play very angry on the field. But I don't think if you asked him, like, are you actually mad? Are you actually surprised that the other team takes the field? I mean, obviously not. It's a game of football, but I think he tries to like, get himself mad at the opponent, and that's what he's trying to say. I think he has full respect for, everybody he's playing. It's just, that wasn't just like an unprompted statement. I guess it's one of those things when you're not in the room, it looks a lot weirder than it was.
Yeah, I mean, I would say if there's any players in college football, Will Anderson is one of the few that could probably say something like that and get away with it.
Yeah.
Real quick before we end, you can see the timer ticking down. We're almost done. What's your score prediction? How do you think it's going to happen? I think you kind of alluded to it earlier.
I forget the score prediction I gave you, but the one that's popping in my head now is like 41-20. Now, like that sounds like a blowout, and I think that's like even giving Alabama the win with the points. But I think that this defense is coming around, and it might force some turnovers. Now Alabama has only forced one turnover, so I think that's going to be things are getting better for Alabama, and I think the offense is also coming around. So this might be a game that Alabama kind of like hits Arkansas, and I don't know how Arkansas is going to respond from this loss. I definitely could see it being closer than 41-20 if things go the other way. Like I said, that needle can move really fast.
All right, Tony Tsoukalas of Tide Illustrated, thank you very much for your time, man. We really appreciate it.
All right, thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yep.